So let's take a look at the following theory here for one moment. It states the following. The fact there was X amount of time between the murders and when the search started means there is room for one person to murder and flee, and perhaps another perpetrator to come to the scene, pose, stage the bodies, take pictures and/or souvenirs. So basically what it's saying there is that one individual may have physically committed this crime, and someone else linked to this murder or linked to that individual may have reattended at a later time, staged the bodies, took items of clothing, took pictures, etc., etc. Now, on the face of it, when I read that, it does seem very outlandish, very, very hard to believe. I mean, who in their right mind would actually reattend a crime scene, particularly if they weren't physically involved in the act of killing, and either take items of clothing or risk leaving their DNA or even risk being seen heading towards that direction? But let's break this theory down into some smaller sections and see if any of this resonates with anybody. Now, obviously the information that we have at this point in time is very sparse, but what we have been told about the crime scene from detectives is that this was an odd crime scene. This crime scene had a lot of unique facts. The crime scene itself is very strange, physically strange. Now, when I hear those words, physically strange, what comes into my mind is the potential for maybe multiple footprints. We have one individual walking towards the girls on the bridge, yet maybe there's multiple footprints found at the crime scene, something which indicates that at least one individual has been there or been up to the crime scene. Maybe multiple DNA, multiple fibres from different jumpers, different jackets, for instance. But as I say, when I hear the words physically strange, that tells me that it doesn't match what we're looking at in front of us here. One individual walking towards the girls, two girls found dead across the creek, and whatever they have found there does not match up with what they believe they are looking for. Now, I'm sure there'll be people out there who will hear those words, strange and odd crime scene, and they'll think, well, okay, of course it's strange and odd because the bodies were moved and they were staged. But when you actually listen to the Robert Ives interview, the impression that I get is that the way he vocalises his recollection of that day and the recollection of discovering the bodies and the crime scene, it's almost as if there's a disconnect here. There's a mismatch between what they found and what they should be looking for. Now, when I say what they should be looking for, again, I'm referring to what was recovered on Liberty German's cell phone. One sole individual heading towards the girls, one man's voice on that phone saying, "Guys, down the hill." Yet maybe, and again, this is just speculation, this is just my own personal viewpoint here, maybe what is found at the crime scene doesn't match what was recovered from the mobile.
There is a lot of crime scene evidence. Some of it is somewhat odd, but when I say that, any murder scene tends to have odd facts about it. I mean, in real life, obviously, people don't kill people really all that often. And this crime scene, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of unique facts there. And honestly, I'm shocked, and I promise you the police are shocked that it wasn't solved in a day or two, because it just didn't seem, we're not used to in rural Indiana. Normally, if person A murders person B, it's obvious who the suspects are. And usually it's pretty obvious how to prove they committed the crime. This crime is very strange. No, I mean, the crime scene was physically strange, but that's for the state police to decide what to release and not release. I've said that before. It's very odd.
For most people, including myself, when you come across these theories online, these suggestions, particularly this one, where a separate individual may have attended or reattended a crime scene after these murders have been committed, someone who was linked to this killer, you kind of think to yourself, well, that would just be crazy. Why would you do that? What purpose would it serve? Surely it would be far too risky. And it is quite an outlandish theory in itself. But I think really this all boils down to the individual on the bridge. At this point in time, we do not know for certain whether this was a lone wolf, someone who just stumbled across the girls that day, or seeked two individuals or one individual and decided to commit murder. We don't know if this person acted solely on his own. We don't know whether this was someone who kept all of his illegal and dark secrets hidden from other people, or whether he was one individual part of something a little bit bigger. Now, if he does have connections, or he did have connections, I think it's worth remembering here that those connections would most likely share similar interests to the killer, similar desires, possibly even similar fantasies. So it isn't beyond the realms of possibility, and I say that loosely, beyond the realms of possibility, that someone connected to that man on the bridge may have reattended at a later date. Yes, it would be risky. Yes, it's incredibly disturbing, but certainly not impossible. Now, my own personal belief, and this is obviously my own personal opinion here, but if anyone went back to the crime scene and it turns out that Richard Allen is indeed the killer of these two girls, then I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if Richard Allen actually went back to the crime scene. And the reason that I say that is because we've heard a lot of talk regarding Richard Allen coming forward to the conservation officer, of kind of inserting himself into the investigation at a very early stage. And I think a lot of people put that down to almost bravado or some kind of preconceived idea, some preconceived plan to get ahead of law enforcement almost. But that may not be the case. It's either one of two things for me. Either this was a preconceived idea that, okay, I'm going to go to this conservation officer, I'm going to make some excuses basically for why I was there, get ahead of the game, so to speak. That is a possibility. But there is also a huge possibility here that this was just done out of sheer panic. And as I covered in a previous video, it may just be that Richard Allen thought he was seen by someone he recognised in town, or someone, he caught the eye of someone who he thought he recognised, and it could just be an act of sheer terror. Actually, I'm going to go and say that I was there before they come knocking on my door. This may not be some sort of preconceived plan. Now, if it was out of fear and terror, or panic I should say, that Richard Allen did go forward or come forward to that conservation officer, then I wouldn't put it past him to reattend the crime scene before these bodies were discovered. We don't know in what position the girls were found. We don't know how they were staged or moved or anything like that. We have nothing confirmed at this point. But I have heard rumours that the bodies were concealed in some way, or they were under some branches or sticks or leaves, or it was almost as if the bodies had tried to be concealed in some way. Now that tells me that there is a possibility that someone could have reattended to try and hide them or move them into a less visible area. And I think what also backs that up a little bit is the fact that we have the Ron Logan, search warrant, or the Ron Logan document where it mentions there that the bodies were moved and staged. Now some people say, well, they were taken away and they were killed and then they were brought back. Now we know that that's not true because there's a large amount of blood found at the crime scene. So where the girls were found is near to where they were killed. They weren't taken away to some shed or some shack and then brought back in the middle hours of, late hours of the morning or whatever. That's not a possibility because of what is found at the crime scene. A large amount of blood was found at the crime scene. So that should tell everybody that they were killed either exactly where they were found or very close by. And just to clarify there, I'm not talking about the moving of the girls whilst they are alive. I'm talking about where the actual murder took place. It's evident from what was found at the crime scene that the actual murder happened close to where the bodies are found. That's evident by, as I say, the large amount of blood found at the crime scene. What we do know about the crime scene, however, is that both the bodies of Abigail Williams and Liberty German were both moved and staged after they were killed. What we cannot say for certain is when that actually occurred. Now, I would lean on the side that this was done shortly after the murders were committed, but can we really discredit the possibility that someone reattended the crime scene a few hours later, a couple of hours later, maybe to try and hide the bodies or stage the bodies? I guess we can't discredit that possibility entirely. However, I do feel it is incredibly unlikely. The only way that I could see that being a possibility is if there is some truth in Richard Allen not being so much a master manipulator, but actually being incredibly fearful and concerned of being caught when he approached that conservation officer. Was this a case of, I might have left something at the crime scene, maybe I can hide the bodies, I was in a fairly concealed area, if I go back there, there's probably no one there, I won't be seen, maybe I can go back there and hide them under some leaves or twigs or branches. We don't know the thought process of the individual who committed this crime. Anyway, do leave your own thoughts and theories regarding the crime scene down below in the comments section. I'll be sure to check those out. And as always, many thanks for joining me for this particular video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.